All right, in this video, we are going to talk about Ahaz. We have so many kings on the bottom of our timeline now that I had to move to a new location. So I moved up. I'm moving up in the world. Everybody loves my humor all the time. This class is all about Ahaz, and specifically, we're going to talk about some circumstances with him. I said that we're just going to try and structure things and keep things straight, but there is just no way to not focus on one of the major points. This is a great lesson. I hope that you write it in your Bible and I hope that you remember it because this is one of those things that you're going to need at some point in your life to remember. You're going to want to share it with other people. If you are teaching a Bible class or if you're preaching a sermon, just take these notes right out of your Bible. You can teach somebody this stuff with a map. It's really a powerful lesson, and so I'm excited to go through that with you today. Let's go to our Bible, 2 Kings chapter 16, and we'll start by marking Ahaz because this is where it starts. 2 Kings 16 and verse 1, in the 17th year of Pekah the son of Remaliah, Ahaz the son of Jotham, king of Judah, began to reign. So we're going to mark Ahaz. He gets a green highlight because he's a king of Judah. In the margin of our Bible, he is number 11. Wait, that's not right. Sorry. I hope that you didn't do that already. He's king number 12. Ahaz is king number 12. And the parallel text, the place where we're going to find this in Chronicles, and so we're going to write this in blue pen, is 2 Chronicles 28. So that is Ahaz, and there is nothing good about him to say. Let's start reading in verse 2. Ahaz was 20 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem, and he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God as his father David had done, but he walked in all the ways of the kings of Israel. He even burned his son as an offering, according to the despicable practices of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. And he sacrificed and made offerings on the high places and the hills and under every green tree. So one of the things that is different about this from everything up to this point is you will see things like this, nevertheless, the high places were not removed, and the people still sacrificed and made offerings. But when we get to Ahaz, he's the one who's doing the sacrifices and the offerings. And at one point, it's even his own kids. He offers his own kids to these foreign gods. And so let's do this. I really am inclined to just do this whole thing in red, but I try to keep it as clean and minimal as I possibly can. So here's what I'm going to do. He did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God. At the end of verse 2, that's going to get a red highlight. And I think that I want this too. He walked in the way of the kings of Israel. None of them were good. And so I want to know he's not a good guy. He's even living like, this is how I remember him. Ahaz sounds like Ahab. He lives like Ahab in that entire nightmare that went with that whole situation. And there's another thing that I think I want. Now that I'm reading it through with you, I think that I would like to know this. According to the despicable practices of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. So this guy is not just bad like the northern kingdom of Israel. He's bad like the people before Israel was even Israel. The people that God drove out of the promised land. Ahab is not a good guy. So that's all that we're going to say about that by the way of introduction. Let's go down to verse 5. And this is where we're going to start to write a note. But how about this? Let's read it, and then I'll show you a map and try and explain what's going on here, and it'll make some sense by the time we're done. In verse 5, then Rezin, I'll read it off the screen so you don't have to look at the top of my shiny head. Then Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, So here's what you get into your mind. You have two kings, the king of Syria, which is just north of Israel, and the king of Israel. We have two kings. Rezin and Pekah came up to wage war on Jerusalem, and they besieged Ahaz, but could not conquer him. At that time, Reza the king of Syria recovered Elath for Syria and drove the men of Judah from Elath, and the Edomites came to Elath, where they dwell to this day. So Ahaz, this is our king, the king of Judah and Jerusalem, Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I am your servant and your son. What? I mean, we already know he's not a good guy, but that is really something to say. Because when God made his promise to David, originally in 2 Samuel 7, the idea is, David, you and your family, you and your lineage, you will be my servants and you will be my son. Your son will be as a son to me. And here is Ahaz, the descendant of David, saying to the king of Assyria, of all things, I am your servant and I am your son. That's nasty. Here's what he says. Come up and rescue me from the hand of the king of Syria and from the hand of the king of Israel who are attacking me. And he takes everything from the house of God and he pays the king of Assyria and says, I need some help. You come and help me. So let's do this. Here is a map of what we're looking at. And I'll kind of give you some of the background. On the left-hand side, you see the map, the big green space on the top, that is the kingdom of Assyria at this time. And the purple down there on the bottom left area, that's Israel, and then below that is Judah. So here's what's happening. Assyria in the north doesn't really care about the promised land. They don't care about Israel and Judah. But that is the only way to get to Egypt, who is another major world power at this time. And so it's nothing more than a land bridge. But as you're going through the land bridge in order to get to Egypt, you just as well conquer all the people. And the people who are there caught up in this nonsense do not like it. So it looks like I'm going to have to move my picture again. I didn't think about this. So look, let me move my picture over here real quick. Look at this map on the right. See Aram in the yellow at the top right? That's Syria. At the very top of that red line, right up here, this is Damascus. This is Syria. The green is Israel, and the purple is Judah. So Syria and Damascus make an alliance with Israel, the capital is Samaria, and they say to each other, the king of Assyria is passing through, and if we have any chance at all of standing against Assyria and keeping our land for ourselves and keeping ourselves alive, we're going to have to bond forces. We're going to have to make an alliance and come together. And wouldn't it be great if we could get Judah on our side too? But Judah wouldn't join. Ahaz and Judah would not join. And so they said, fine, we'll fight against you, Judah. We'll take over your territory and your people, and then we'll have a better chance of fighting against Assyria whenever they come through. And so Ahaz decides, I'm going to ask Assyria. Let me move myself back over here. Sorry about this. I told you a million times, I'm not a technology guy, so you just have to stick with me. Let's ask Assyria, this big green space on the top, to come and to save us from Syria and Israel. That's what's going on. So let's go back to our Bible text, and let's put some stuff in the margin of our Bible so that we can remember what's going on here. Okay, you ready? 2 Kings chapter 16 and verse 5. I think I'm just going to make my note on this one word. Make a note. I'm not going to highlight anything. Let me get rid of my highlight. This is just going to be a note in the margin of my Bible. And here's what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call this, here's what I'll do. I'll put verses 5 through 10. And I'm going to call this the Syro-Ephraimite War. Syro is Syria, Ephraimite is Israel. And here's how you spell it if you can't see it on the screen. Syro, S-Y-R-O dash Ephraimite, E-P-H-R-A-I-M-I-T-E. The Syro-Ephraimite War. I know the dates for this one, so I like to stick that in there. 735 to 732. So, this is not a 5-minute deal. This lasts for a couple years. 735 to 732 BC. And in my blue pen, I know that I'm also going to find this story of the Syro-Ephraimite War in 2 Chronicles chapter 28 and verses 5 through 21. And this is where it gets really fun. I like this too. Isaiah chapter 7. And I'm just going to go ahead and write verses 1 through 9 there. Isaiah chapter 7, verses 1 through 9. So here we've got a pretty big overview of the Syro-Ephraimite War and where we're going to find it in other parts of the Bible. It's not just boring history. Stick with me here because I promise there's something good that comes from this. Let's go to Chronicles. 2 Chronicles chapter 28. 2 Chronicles chapter 28 and let's start in verse 1. 2 Chronicles 28 and verse 1. Ahaz was 20 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. Ahaz is going to get the treatment here in 28:1. We are going to make that a green highlight. Not because he's a good guy, but because he's a king in Judah. Next to Ahaz, I'm going to write number 12. And with my blue pen, the parallel text is going to be 2 Kings 16. That's where I'm going to find out about this. And you can just do something. We did this already. Look at the second part of verse 1. He did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Yeah, not a good guy. And the whole thing just describes he is not a good guy in any way. Jump down to verse 5. Let's do this first. Let's do our marking first, and then I want to walk you through something. So next to verse 5, this is where I'm going to put my note. There's not going to be a highlight. I'm going to write verses, what did I say earlier? Verses 5 through 21. Verses 5 through 21 are the Syro-Ephraimite War, 735 to 732 BC. We're just writing the same thing twice because we need to know what's going on here. The parallel text in blue pen is going to be 2 Kings 16, verses 5 through 10. And Isaiah 7, verses 1 through 9. 2 Kings 16, 5 through 10, and Isaiah chapter 7, verses 1 through 9. That's the Syro-Ephraimite war stuff that we were talking about. Okay, so in the Chronicles account, I would underline this because if you underline this and do it in conjunction with a map, you're not just reading about places that don't mean anything to us. I'm going to show you as we go through these different names, what we understand by these different places is that even though I'm really hard on Ahaz, he is not a good guy at all. I can still feel for him just a little bit because this guy is in a bad situation. He is totally surrounded and losing, like losing bad. He's losing a lot of people. So start with me in verse 5. It says, "Therefore the Lord his God gave him into the hand of the king of Syria, who defeated him and took captive a great number of his people and brought them to Damascus." So I'm going to do this. I look down at my page and I can see this. I can just walk through this real quick. I'm going to take Syria and I'm going to underline it in red. This is not good. This is not good for anybody. It's not good for Ahaz especially. So Syria, I'll show you on a map in just a second what this looks like. But Syria has come up against Jerusalem and they have defeated them and taken a lot of people captive. Okay, keep going in verse 5. He was also given into the hand of the king of Israel. I'm going to underline Israel in red. Remember, Syro-Ephraimite war, Syria. Ephraimite is Israel. He was also given into the hand of the king of Israel, who struck him with a great force. For Pekah, the son of Remaliah, killed 120,000 from Judah in one day. All of them men of valor, because they had forsaken the Lord, the God of their fathers. So this is what we're talking about. Like, this is no joke. When we talk about a war, 120,000 people in one day is a lot of people to die. Look at verse 8. The men of Israel took captive 200,000 of their relatives, men, women, sons, and daughters. So when I talk about Ahaz losing, like, he's losing bad. This is not a little loss. Jump down to verse 16. In verse 16, as if it's not bad enough that Syria and Israel are fighting against him. Verse 16, at that time, King Ahaz sent to the king of Assyria for help. Verse 17, for the Edomites had again invaded and defeated Judah and carried away captives. So let's take the Edomites and let's underline that in red. And then, man, this is a really bad day for this guy. Verse 18, and the Philistines had made raids on the cities of the Shephelah and the Negeb and of Judah. So let's take Philistines and let's underline them with red. So here's what I've got for you. I'm going to go back over to my map and I'm going to have to move my head again. 1 second. There we go. Okay. So on this map on the right-hand side, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but Jerusalem is circled red. This is where Ahaz is. Here's Damascus up here in the yellow in the top right. So let's see if I can make this happen. Syria is attacking Ahaz. Here is Samaria, the capital of Israel. Israel is attacking Ahaz in Jerusalem. Here's Edom in the bottom right. Edom is attacking Ahaz and Jerusalem. And here are like the main example of the enemies of God's people throughout the centuries, the Philistines. Here are the Philistines on the bottom left-hand side of this. The Philistines are attacking Ahaz. And on top of that, you got the Mediterranean Sea on the left over here. You're not going to go anywhere with that. On the right-hand side of this, you have the desert. You're not going to go anywhere over that. So when we talk about Ahaz having a bad day, like, he is hopeless. There is nothing. It's coming from every direction. There's no way for him to escape this situation. And so his solution is, let me move my head again. His solution is to call on Assyria and say, hey, you got to come and help me because there's no way for me to get out of this mess. So let's go back to our Bible. 2 Chronicles chapter 28. We have the Edomites underlined red. We have the Philistines underlined red. And then look at verse 20. You're going to be shocked by this. I know this is going to just blow you away. Verse 20. So Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came against him and afflicted him instead of strengthening him. What? I'm shocked. You mean the Assyrians are not our friends after all? That's shocking to me. In verse 20, I'm going to take Assyria and I'm going to underline them in red also. All of this just to make this one point. So when you're teaching somebody and you're going through this and you're drawing pictures on a map, you're talking to somebody else and you're like, look, here's the thing. What do you do when you're hopeless? Because that's what this is. This is a picture of total hopelessness. I'm completely surrounded. I have zero options. My people are dying. Like, this is just about as bad for Ahaz of a situation as anybody could possibly imagine. So my question is right now, what do you do when you're hopeless? Well, we know the end of the story. You definitely do not ask the king of Assyria for help, which, the politics is not the help. Worldly solutions is not the help. That's not how you're going to get out of this mess ever. So let's do one more thing, and then we'll be done with this lesson. Turn over to Isaiah chapter 7. And I'm not going to mark Ahaz as king because that's not what we're doing in Isaiah. But next to Isaiah chapter 7 and verse 1, I am going to put this note. There's nothing highlighted, but I'm going to write verses 1 through 9. Syro-Ephraimite war, 735, 732 BC. And in my blue pen, I'm going to put the parallel account where I can find these things, which is 2 Kings 16, 5 through 10, and 2 Chronicles 28, 5 through 21. Those verses are 2 Kings 16, 5 through 10, and 2 Chronicles 28, 5 through 21. Let's read all 9 verses of Isaiah. This is the prophet Isaiah talking to Ahaz and telling him, Ahaz, this is really bad for you. This is what you do in this situation. Here's the answer to our question. What do you do when you're totally hopeless and you have no options and you're losing really bad? Verse 1. In the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, son of Uzziah, king of Judah, Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, the king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem to wage war against it, but could not yet mount an attack against it. When the house of David was told, Syria is in league with Ephraim, that's Israel, the heart of Ahaz and the heart of his people shook as the trees of the forest shake before the wind. Now see, I'm not going to beat Ahaz up over that. We know how bad this is for him. So he's afraid. Yeah, he's afraid. I would have been afraid too. In verse 3, the Lord said to Isaiah, go out to meet Ahaz, you and Shear-Jashub your son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway of the washer's field, and say to him, I'm going to highlight this, and this I'm so excited to tell you this because this is probably my favorite verse in the entire Bible. I love this so much, and at various times in my life, I've turned to this passage and I've just said it to myself over and over and over again. What do you do? What is God's word to you when you're completely surrounded and you're totally hopeless? This is what he says. Be careful, be quiet, do not fear, and do not let your heart be faint because of these 2 smoldering stumps of firebrands at the fierce anger of Rezin and Syria and the son of Remaliah because of Syria with Ephraim. Okay, let's highlight that. Definitely. Be careful. Be quiet. Do not fear, and do not let your heart be faint. If ever there was going to be a passage in the Bible that you were going to memorize, this one should be it. Because it's not if you need it someday, it's when you need it someday. This is what you do, and this is what you remember when you're totally hopeless and surrounded on every side. Be careful, be quiet. Do not fear, do not let your heart be faint. Look at what Isaiah says to him. Let's start in verse 7. Thus says the Lord God, it shall not stand, and it shall not come to pass. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin. And within 65 years, Ephraim will be shattered from being a people. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria, the capital of Israel is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is the son of Remaliah. This is also this is my favorite passage in the Bible, like they go together. This is what he says. If you are not firm in faith, you will not be firm at all. Isn't that awesome? Let's highlight that. If you are not firm in faith, then you will not be firm at all. And I want you to have some context here. I want you to think about what this is saying. Look at what he tells him. Within 65 years, Ephraim will be shattered from being a people. So Ahaz is losing his mind because he's surrounded and people are dying and getting carried off, and he has no hope and he has nowhere to turn. And Isaiah comes to him and he says, hey, listen, be careful, be quiet, do not fear, do not let your heart be faint. And this is the reason why. He says, this isn't going to last in 65 years. Israel's going to be shattered from being a people. So, imagine that you call 911 and 911 response time says, yeah, we'll be there in 65 years to help you out. I think one of the big lessons to take away from this is our job at every turn in life, whenever we need help, whenever we feel hopeless, our job is to throw ourselves entirely at God's feet. And maybe we're not going to see some magical solution to all of our problems in the snap of a finger. It might not even come in our own lifetime. We might suffer, the people around us might suffer, but you will never, ever, ever go wrong putting your faith entirely in God and looking to Him for your solutions and for your answers. Whatever you do, don't go to the king of Assyria for help, because that's not going to make it better. If you are not firm in faith, you will not be firm at all. And so that's going to conclude our talk about Ahaz, King Ahaz, and I also list with him Ahaz and the Syro-Ephraimite War. In our next video, we're going to talk about one of the worst kings. Ahaz has a son, Hezekiah, who turns out to be one of the best kings. And so we got some good stuff coming. Thanks for being with me on this recording. I'll see you next time.